On today's show, we have our guest, David Gould, and we're going to be talking about the heresy called Phyletism. Phyletism is where you put culture above the religion, and how really easy it is to fall into that, or to say, my culture is more orthodox than some other culture. I mean, what culture is the best orthodox culture? It's amazing. I spend a lot of time with immigrants and how many of them embrace North American culture. There's individuals I've met, I was shocked to find out that they were actually immigrants because they were so much like our culture, or even hyper our culture. And I've met many immigrants who really love our way of life and they're Orthodox. So do some cultures make you a super Orthodox, or do some cultures make you a lower level Orthodox? What is really Orthodox culture? And honestly, if you look at civilization, we don't dress up like the Byzantine Empire anymore. And if you look at the ancient Greeks, the way they dressed were very different than the ways the ancient Byzantines would dress. So is there even such a thing as Orthodox culture? David Gould?
Well, there's several things in what you're probing there, Vladimir. Phyletism is a term that entered Orthodox vocabulary a long, long time ago. And it is, in a way, you could see it going all the way back into the book of Acts and into the debates that occurred among the very early people of the way, the very early Christian community, the apostolic community. We know of the debate there between the Apostle Peter and the Apostle Paul, where Peter and other of the apostles, being good Jews, assumed that in order to really be a proper follower of the Messiah, since they saw Jesus Christ as the Messiah, in order to be a proper follower of Jesus Christ, you really had to be a Jew first. So there were debates, early debates about, because Paul, of course, had gone and evangelized Gentiles in a variety of places. There were debates about whether you needed to be circumcised before you could be a Christian, or as part of the initiation to being a Christian, because that was essential if you were a Jew. And of course, many other things, the dietary laws, the liturgical cycle, many, many other things. So Phyletism has a couple layers of meaning. One is, do you need to be part of a culture before you can be a proper Christian, or as you framed it, an Orthodox Christian? Or do you need to be part of the state, part of a particular national group, in order to be a proper Christian? This is a theme that has arisen within Orthodox societies, but it's far beyond that. I mean, I would argue that if we look at something like white Christian nationalism among the evangelicals in the United States, this is also a form of Phyletism. The part of it that I think is at least the simplest for me to understand is the notion of orthodoxy being identified with a particular cultural community. There's a bit of an accident of history here. When people from Greece, from Bulgaria, from Serbia, from Romania, from Russia, Ukraine immigrate to Canada, and in the early immigration, they would bring some clergy with them, and they would establish their church. And since their language was Greek or Russian or what have you, that was the language of their prayer and their worship. But of course, there really isn't such a thing as Greek Orthodoxy or Russian Orthodoxy or Serbian Orthodoxy. Those are references to what the cultural container is for orthodoxy. And someone like St. John Chrysostom and many other of the church fathers and spiritual mothers of our tradition have made it very clear, and Jesus Christ makes it very clear, of course, in a supreme way in the Gospels, that we only really have one, what shall I call it? One ultimate home. And that ultimate home is the kingdom of God.
Mm-hmm.
So we are called to be citizens of the kingdom of God, first and foremost. Now, I wouldn't want this to diminish the cultural world of Greeks or of Russians or of Ukrainians or of Serbs or Romanians, because I think those cultures are also beautiful things. And those cultures also have a richness. And of course, all religious life has exists in some kind of culture. You can't really separate it. I like to think, for example, of the Christian faith as yeast.
Okay.
And the bread as the culture. So the center, in my judgment, the center of cultures, wherever we find them, is the religious life. It's the narratives, it's the wisdom, it's the images and the stories, it's the texts, it's the rituals. These are really very central to human cultures. But Phyletism is when the assumption is, within the Orthodox Christian tradition, the assumption is that you can't really be Orthodox unless you are a Greek, for example, or a Russian, or a Ukrainian. There's a film that was made a long time ago called My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people saw it at the time and got a big kick out of it. And in that film, the young American who falls in love with the young Greek woman, after lots of struggles, gets convinced that he needs to become Orthodox, enter the Greek Orthodox Church. So he gets baptized in the Greek Orthodox Church. And the moment he's out of the baptismal ritual, his now father-in-law to be says to him, "So now you're Greek." So this illustrates the struggle, and it's an issue of how we understand religion and how we understand culture and how we understand national identity. We have a particularly problematic part of this on our plate right now, as you no doubt know, with Russia invading Ukraine. And with this has led to a rise of this kind of Phyletism, of assuming that somehow your nation God is on the side of your nation, as opposed to being on the side of all human beings, seeking that all of them can enter the presence of the kingdom of God. So, in times of war, this often becomes problematic because often clergy and bless the military in one way or another. And my own view is that blessing of people in the military is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, but realize what you're actually doing. You're not blessing military adventure. That is simply not something that Christians can do. You don't bless military adventure. You are praying a blessing that those who tragically are engaged in the struggle and killing of others, that they will have the strength for the path that is laid before them, that they will, as much as they're able, not harm, not destroy. We have lots of teachings about this, notions of just war, notions of what the laws of war are. But the blessing of soldiers goes much beyond that. It is recognizing that they are entering a kind of crucifixion. They're entering a kind of suffering, and that deeply endangers their being. And so a blessing is always pretty much the same. It is praying that the oil of gladness, the oil of healing, will be poured upon your wounds. So Phyletism is, as you said, it's understood as a kind of heresy within Orthodoxy because it can incline us to locate what is ultimate in the wrong place.
Mm-hmm.
What is ultimate is our relationship to the lover of the world, our relationship to the best of teachers, Jesus Christ, who unveils for us the fullness of our human nature and the fullness of God's love. But when we assume something less than that, that is, we assume that our culture is what's ultimate. Our culture is precious, but it's not ultimate. When we assume our nation or our state or our empire is ultimate, this is idolatry, because this is to place at the center of what is ultimate something which is not Jesus Christ, the full expression of what it means to be human and the full expression of God's love in the world. So idolatry is a misstep, and it always leads to death dealing. So Phyletism is considered a heresy because it is idolatry, because it is to place as ultimate not your relationship to the creator and sustainer of the world, and thus to see all human beings as the image and likeness of God, but it is to place as ultimate your nationality or your culture and see other people as not sharing in that, and for that reason discardable.